The return to the mansion felt like stepping back into a different world, but this time, the weight that usually came with it seemed lighter. Amara and Adrian had crossed a threshold in their relationship, no longer bound by pretense or formality, no longer pretending their connection wasn't real. Adrian parked the car in front of the grand estate, cutting the engine as he turned to look at Amara. His eyes held a softness she had rarely seen before, a silent promise that what they had built during their time away wasn't just a fleeting moment. "I don't want us to fall back into old patterns," Adrian said quietly, his hand resting on hers. "I don't want to pretend anymore." Amara's heart swelled. She had spent so much time wondering if Adrian would ever let his walls down, if he could truly care about her beyond the circumstances that had brought them together. Now, hearing him speak so plainly, she felt a surge of hope she hadn't dared to feel before. "We won't," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Things have changed, Adrian. We've changed." Adrian smiled, the warmth in his eyes making her feel like she was exactly where she belonged. "Good," he said softly, "because I don't want to lose what we have." They stepped out of the car together, walking into the mansion side by side. The large doors swung open, and as they entered, the familiar grandeur of the house greeted them. But everything feels different now. It wasn't the imposing place that had once made Amara feel small and out of place. It was simply their home, a place where they could continue to explore the bond they had found. The days that followed were filled with quiet moments of understanding, a new rhythm forming between them. Adrian was more open now, his usual intensity tempered by a growing softness whenever he was around Amara. She noticed the subtle changes, how he would linger when they talked, how his hand would brush hers more often, how his gaze softened when he looked at her. For Amara, it was a revelation. She had always known there was more to Adrian than the playboy persona he projected to the world, but now she was seeing the real him, the man who cared deeply, who struggled with vulnerability, and who was willing to let someone into his carefully controlled life. One evening, as they sat in the library together, Amara curled up in a chair with a book while Adrian worked at his desk. The soft glow of the fire cast a warm light over the room, and the peaceful quiet felt comforting. After a while, Adrian looked up from his papers and caught her gaze. "What are you reading?" he asked, his voice gentle. Amara smiled, holding up the book for him to see. "It's an old romance. Nothing too dramatic, but it's nice to escape into." Adrian raised an eyebrow, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "A romance, huh?" She nodded, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Maybe I'm a romantic after all." Adrian's smile widened, and he stood, walking over to her. He leaned down, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "I don't think there's anything wrong with that," he said softly, his gaze lingering on hers. Her heart fluttered at his touch, the tenderness in his eyes making her feel safe, cherished. "I didn't think you'd be the type to enjoy romance," she teased, her smile playful. Adrian chuckled, shaking his head. "I might surprise you," he murmured, his voice low. Their playful banter was easy, natural, and filled with a growing affection that neither of them needed to hide anymore. The barriers between them had fallen, and they were learning what it meant to be together, truly together. As the weeks passed, the mansion became a place of joy instead of isolation. Adrian and Amara spent their days working side by side, building something real between them. They learned each other's quirks, shared laughter over quiet dinners, and found comfort in the simple act of being in each other's presence. One afternoon, Adrian surprised her by taking her out to the gardens, a place she had rarely visited. The flowers were in full bloom, their vibrant colors bright against the green backdrop. Adrian took her hand, leading her through the maze of paths until they reached a quiet spot by a small fountain. "I used to come here when I needed to think," Adrian admitted, his voice quiet. "But it feels different now with you here." Amara smiled, touched by his words. She squeezed his hand, feeling a sense of belonging she hadn't expected. "It's beautiful." Adrian glanced at her, his expression softening. "So are you." The words took her by surprise, and she felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. "You're not so bad yourself," she replied, her voice teasing but full of affection. Adrian chuckled, pulling her closer until she was nestled against his chest. "I'm serious, Amara. You've changed everything for me." Amara's heart swelled with emotion as she looked up at him. "You've changed everything for me too, Adrian." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, the quiet beauty of the garden surrounding them. It felt like they had finally found a place where they could just be, without expectations, without pretense, just them together. That night, as they lay in bed, the weight of the past few months seemed to melt away. Adrian pulled Amara close, his arm draped over her waist, his breath warm against her neck. "I've been thinking," Adrian said softly, his voice thick with sleep. "About what?" Amara asked, her fingers tracing small patterns on his arm. "About us." "About how this all started," he replied. "I didn't expect any of it. I thought it would be simple, just business, just helping you with your family's debt." Amara smiled, though her heart ached at the memory of how their relationship had begun. "It wasn't simple for long, was it?" Adrian chuckled softly. "No, it wasn't. You became more important than I ever expected." Her heart fluttered at his words, but before she could respond, Adrian lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers in the dim light of the room. "I've never felt like this about anyone before, Amara. You've changed me in ways I didn't think were possible." Amara's breath caught at the sincerity in his voice, the raw emotion in his gaze. She had always hoped that Adrian felt the same way she did, but hearing him say it out loud, knowing that he had opened himself up to her in ways he hadn't with anyone else, made her heart swell with love for him. "I love you, Adrian," she whispered, the words slipping out so naturally, so effortlessly. Adrian's eyes softened, his expression filled with something deep and unguarded. "I love you too, Amara," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "More than I ever thought I could." They kissed, slow and tender, a quiet promise between them. The walls that had once stood between them were gone, and in their place was something real, something lasting. As they lay together, the future stretched out before them, filled with possibility. There were still challenges ahead, still things to figure out, but for the first time, they faced it all as equals, as partners. And with Adrian by her side, Amara knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The calm between Adrian and Amara was unlike anything either of them had known before. As the days passed, their love deepened, growing more certain with every shared smile, every tender moment. It was no longer just about attraction or necessity. They had built something real, something worth fighting for. But as perfect as their time together had become, the looming presence of the past still hung over them. The people who had been after Adrian, who had nearly torn their lives apart, were not gone. The danger had merely paused, and they both knew that in order to truly move forward, they had to deal with it once and for all. One evening, as they sat together in the mansion's dining room, Amara broached the subject that had been lingering at the back of her mind. "Adrian, we can't ignore what's happened," she said gently, placing her hand over his. "The people who were after you, we need to make sure it's over." Adrian's face darkened slightly, but he didn't pull away from her touch. Instead, he gave a resigned nod, knowing that she was right. "I know," he admitted quietly. "I've been working behind the scenes to ensure they're dealt with." Amara frowned, concerned, flickering in her eyes. "Working behind the scenes? What do you mean?" Adrian sighed, leaning back in his chair. "The men who were after me, the ones who saw you as a weakness they could exploit, they've been operating in the shadows for years. I've been tracking them down one by one, making sure they're no longer a threat." Amara's heart raced at his words. "But you never told me." "I didn't want to worry you," Adrian said softly. "After everything we've been through, I wanted you to feel safe. But you're right. We need to confront this together." Amara squeezed his hand, her heart swelling with love for him. "I'm with you, Adrian. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." That night, Adrian made the final call. The information he had gathered over the months about the people who had been after him, their locations, their weaknesses, was finally ready to be acted on. He wasn't alone in this. His team of trusted security personnel and investigators had been working tirelessly to gather everything they needed. Now, it was time to put an end to the threats once and for all. The following day, Adrian and Amara sat together in his office, going over the final plans. It felt strange to Amara, sitting there beside Adrian as they discussed something so dangerous. But this time, she wasn't just an observer. She wasn't the frightened house help who had been caught up in Adrian's world. She was his partner, and they were facing this together. "This is the last of them," Adrian said, sliding a file toward her. "Once they're dealt with, it's over. We can finally be free of all this." Amara glanced at the file, her mind racing. It wasn't just about eliminating a threat. It was about closing a chapter in their lives that had been filled with fear and uncertainty. "And after this?" she asked softly. Adrian looked at her, his expression softening. "After this, we live together. No more running, no more danger." A smile tugged at her lips. "I like the sound of that." The plan was set in motion the following week. Adrian had organized a meeting with the remaining members of the group that had been targeting him, luring them into a trap. It wasn't the first time he had to play this kind of game, but this time felt different. This time, he wasn't just protecting his business or his reputation. He was protecting the life he had built with Amara. The meeting was scheduled to take place at one of Adrian's properties on the outskirts of the city. His security team had the area locked down, ensuring that nothing would go wrong. Adrian had insisted that Amara stay at the mansion, but she refused. She wasn't going to sit on the sidelines this time. "I'm not letting you do this alone," she said firmly as they prepared to leave. Adrian's expression softened, and he nodded, knowing there was no point in arguing. "All right, but promise me you'll stay close." "I will," she promised. The sun had just begun to set when they arrived at the property. Adrian's men were already in position, keeping an eye on the location as they waited for the group to show up. Amara stood by Adrian's side, her heart racing but her resolve strong. The minutes stretched on, each one feeling heavier than the last. Then, finally, the cars arrived. Adrian's face hardened as he watched the group step out, a mix of dangerous men who had once tried to use Amara as leverage against him. They had underestimated him before, thinking they could exploit his weaknesses, but this time was different. This time, Adrian was ready. The confrontation was swift. Adrian's men moved quickly, surrounding the group and making it clear that there was no way out. Amara stood close to Adrian, her heart pounding as she watched the scene unfold. It was tense but controlled, and within minutes it was over. The men were taken into custody, and the threat that had hung over their lives for so long was finally gone. Adrian exhaled slowly, the weight of it all finally lifting from his shoulders. He turned to Amara, his expression softening as he pulled her into his arms. "It's over," he whispered. Amara rested her head against his chest, relief flooding through her. "We did it." The drive back to the mansion felt different this time. There was no lingering fear, no tension hanging over them. For the first time, they were truly free. Free to live their lives without the shadows of the past chasing them. As they pulled up to the mansion, Adrian turned to Amara, his eyes filled with something she hadn't seen before: peace. "I've spent so long fighting to control everything," he said softly. "But with you, it doesn't feel like a fight anymore." Amara smiled, her heart swelling with love for him. "You don't have to fight, Adrian. Not with me." He leaned in, pressing a gentle kiss to her lips, and for the first time, Amara felt like they had truly arrived at a new beginning. There were no more walls between them, no more barriers keeping them apart. They were just two people in love, ready to build a life together. In the weeks that followed, the mansion became a place of joy, not tension. Adrian and Amara settled into a routine, one that was filled with love, laughter, and quiet moments of contentment. They spent their days together, exploring the new depth of their relationship, and their nights wrapped in each other's arms, knowing that they had faced the worst and come out stronger on the other side. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, watching the sunset, Adrian turned to her with a look of quiet determination. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice steady, "about the future." Amara smiled, leaning into him. "What about it?" Adrian took her hand, his eyes filled with emotion. "I want to spend it with you. All of it." Her heart fluttered, her breath catching in her throat as she realized what he was saying. "Adrian, I love you, Amara, he said softly, his gaze never leaving hers. I want you in my life, every day, for the rest of it. Will you marry me? Tears welled in Amara's eyes, her heart swelling with love for the man who had once been so closed off, so distant. He had let her in, and now he was asking her to stay with him forever. Yes, she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Yes, Adrian, I will. They kissed, soft and sweet, as the sun set behind them, casting a warm glow over the garden. It was the start of a new chapter, one that was filled with love, hope, and the promise of a future they would build together, free from the past and full of endless possibilities.